We are living through a new phase of heroization, in fact, and we haven't still reflected enough what do these new heroes mean to us. We celebrate them, but it's still some sort of celebration, but I feel some lack of reflection over this process. First of all, I mean the heroes of Maidan, who they are stated as usually as a heavenly hundred. A heavenly hundred is sort of very poetic name for modern consciousness. It can look a little bit too poetic, too romantic, and I really feel, as also historian of Slavic literatures, and I teach history of Slavic Romanticism. So I can compare it to the social and aesthetic tendencies of 19th century. We live through very similar processes, like in the middle of 19th century. The way of heroization is more or less the same. Some people, some observers, mostly from the West, from Western countries, told me that to them it looks a little bit strange that we still use such poetic, romantic terms like heavenly hundred, but it's very it can be easily explained with in the terms of the whole atmosphere of Maidan, of this national resistance, because this was sort of national resistance. It was everything what was going on there was stated in national terms. So, and the community, the community of protesters, as a new, as a model of societies, was something like a micro society, who represented or who believed they represent the national interest of nation, not the state. That contradiction was very important. The interest of nation versus the interest of this oligarchic state. No? And it was really a model of community with the quite traditional roles. For example, the gender roles were very in this extreme situation, because existentially it was really very extreme. You had to keep the place. I mean, the Maidan. You had something like a fortress in the very center of the city, and the model was very traditional. You have the defenders and the people who supported the defenders. The defenders were mostly young men, and the supporters were women who cooked, who encouraged a man who defended that urban fortress. It was something like the a fundamental flashback in the time. Time after time I had an impression that I'm somewhere in the medieval times. To me, it was nothing strange that some very traditional mechanisms of heroization also revived in this situation. So we glorified the people who lost their lives in this situation in a very traditional way. This was very important. We still are in a situation of huge instability. First of all, because of the continuing war. The war conflict, the military conflict in the eastern parts of Ukraine is still going on. Now we can. It's still unpredictable. There are some some internal changes in these occupied territories, rebel territories, as someone stated, because there should be some plan for future, also for them. One of the possible scenarios is very similar to the scenario with, for example, Southern Ossetia or Abkhazia or Transnistria and Moldavia, so-called gray stripe, which is the territory of fundamental instability in the region, manipulated, and well, a source of instability and unpredictable politics. And of course, it's one of the main elements of the foreign politics of Russian Federation to create such sources of instability in the region, in Eastern Europe. And now we have such a very important source of unpredictable future within our country, in fact. Well, this I decided to write a text which is totally based on facts. In fact, it's a report, it's a historical report about 3 people. 2 of them were my friends, and I could observe the mechanism of how they became the heroes. So my friends, in certain circumstances, became heroes, but they are still the people whom I treat. I perceive them as my friends, but they do not belong to this small space of friendships, small little space of personal contacts. Now they belong to the public space of heroization. This mechanism was very important. It was very interesting to me.